Everyone, and welcome to Medieval Storytime with the creative Contessa. We are here today in Daegu, South Korea, and I regret to say it is very bright out here. I may have to put on a pair of sun spectacles, which may probably result in people making lots of cheeky comments, but there it is. So today's story time, I have prepared for you a reading from the letters of Alessandra Strozzi. She was a mother, a widow, living in Florence in the turbulent years of the 15th century. She was a mother of 8 children, only 5 of whom survived almost into adulthood at any rate. And she was by marriage a member of the powerful but also descendant Strozzi family in Florence in the 15th century. So she has left behind a very unusually large number of letters. She corresponded heavily with many people, including her sons. And so I shall be reading for you today a couple of her letters that she wrote to her sons. So some background about Alessandra. Alessandra was born into the Matinghi clan in Florence. Her family were nouveau riche, basically, or nouveau powerful at any rate. Ayla, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Daegu, South Korea. We are actually at the Daegu Arboretum today. Isn't this a fantastic space? Let me just share with you this beautiful bit of architecture where I have nestled, where I've roosted for the duration of our story time. In the Daegu Arboretum, they've built this beautiful traditional Korean garden. Isn't that gorgeous? Yeah, so I thought this felt like an inspired venue for a story time. So we will be reading from Alessandra's letters today. A little bit of history about Alessandra Strozzi. She was born sometime between 1406 and 1408. Unfortunately, no one seems to have located her actual birth registry, but by reading through tax records and references to her age in various other sources, we sort of can place her as being born sometime between 1406 and 1408. She married Matteo Strozzi of the Strozzi clan, and while the Matinghi were ascendant in Florentine society and had in fact held priorships, which was basically the top level of government in Florence in the 15th century, the Strozzi, unfortunately, found themselves on the wrong side of a power struggle in the 1430s that eventually saw the Medici basically take power. And so the members of the Strozzi family were exiled. And her husband was amongst them, and she went with him. She took the entire brood of children, all 8 of them, and they went and they lived in Pisa, Pesaro, where the Malatestas welcomed them and treated them like guests of honor. So they had a very good life there, except that while they were living there in the 1430s, the plague came back, as it did every 10 to 20 years. Most people don't realize this, that in this era, the plague keeps coming back every 10 to 20 years from the 1340s onward until the 18th century. The plague comes, it strikes, it kills her husband, and it kills 3 of her children. So almost within a very short period of time, she loses almost half of her immediate family. This leaves her as a widow in her mid-20s, basically, as a very young woman. But she has children. So in Florentine society, widows who had children generally didn't remarry. They stayed widowed. And this was in part so that their sons weren't disinherited and wouldn't lose the benefit of their mother's dowry at the time when their mother might pass on. But it also meant that she basically became a woman in her own right. She had power over her own choices. She led her own life. She ruled her own household, and she ended up conducting business and affairs on behalf of her sons. So she basically achieved what it is that most women in most of medieval Europe ultimately kind of wanted, especially if their husbands weren't great. It was widowhood. It was the best way to achieve independence, financial independence, if you married well. Obviously, if you become a poor widow, that is not what anyone wants. Yep. Amish count 1. Oh my gosh. Oh, plague doctor suits. Not Amish. Everyone take another shot. Guys, plague doctor suits are not medieval. I'm sorry, but they're 17th century. There are no plague doctors in the Middle Ages. not in the 14th or 15th century anyway. And there are no plague doctor masks or plague doctor costumes. That's you're talking the 1660s for that. So not medieval. Sorry, everyone. Those beaked masks, not medieval. Modern. That's actually the modern era, contrary to popular misconception about eras. The 17th century is the modern era. So yeah, that's when plague suits date too. Okay, so goodness gracious. Okay. Oh, look, John Dillerman has a small penis. Oh, does no one love you? Poor baby. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so today's medieval story time is going to be several of the letters that Alessandra ended up basically writing to her sons, because her sons, when they achieved the age of majority, they realized that even though they weren't technically yet, they hadn't yet technically been exiled, or that they were officially exiled in the 1440s, because the rest of the Strozzi family had been exiled as part of the Medici's return, they realized they would have no business future if they stayed in Florence. And so they basically followed their Strozzi male relatives to Naples, where their Strozzi uncles and cousins actually helped set them up. Not uncles, cousins. Their Strozzi cousins actually set them up in business. And they actually managed to curry favor with King Ferrante, the king of Naples, and they became more successful than their Strozzi cousins. And so as a consequence of that, Alessandra ends up being their connection back in Florence, and she ends up managing all sorts of business on their behalves. And so she, of course, is back in Florence, they're in Naples, and so she writes them on a very regular basis about a large number of topics, including daily life. And so Alessandra Strozzi's letters are a fantastic way to get a look into daily life in the Middle Ages, in Florence specifically, and what a woman's life was like. So this is a very rich source of information. It's almost autobiographical, because these letters were not written with the understanding that anyone would ever read them except her sons. So there's no motive for prevarication or dissembling. So we're going to actually get a window into the past here that chronicles can't provide, because chronicles are basically clickbait, that other sources of information, of historical documentation, just cannot really provide. So I specifically picked a couple today that relate to food and clothing, because as we know at the Creative Contessa, we love food and we love clothing. And so I thought it might be interesting also for you to hear how she writes about food and clothing. And then we're going to talk about some issues in translation. This is not AI. I am a real person, you morons. Here, let me show you. I am in Daegu, South Korea. This is the Arboretum. Those are real people. I am not AI. Jesus. I'm not AI. The book we'll be reading today is The Selected Letters of Alessandro Strozzi. This is real. My knowledge is real. My research is real. I'm real. I don't use AI. I don't use ChatGPT. I don't use generative AI to write my scripts or teach me or do my research. So I use books, real books that I own in my own library. So yeah, it is a really pretty place. Yep. This is the Daegu Arboretum. So it is a really lovely place to come. Okay, so let's get down to one of the first letters that I have chosen for you. So as I said, Alessandra experiences the unfortunate consequences of the plague in the 1430s. She loses 3 children and her husband. And then her elder sons, the 2 of her elder sons, go and they live in Naples. And so basically starting, let me see, the earliest letters that we have from her date to the 1440s, right? So she starts corresponding with them in the 1440s, and the last letters date to the 1470s. So we're talking about decades of correspondence, a very long period. You might not be AI, but I I am. Do you understand? Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. No, okay, I'll answer this question. Do they really eat dog meat in Korea? They used to, but it was a specific dog that was bred specifically for the purpose of being eaten, but that got outlawed a couple of years ago. So no more. No more dog in Korea. And it was never just picking dogs up off of the street and eating them. So no, those days are done. However, there are places in China where you can still get a very wide array of meats, shall we say. Yep. Imagine wandering into a town and half the people are just gone. Well, that's kind of what happened at certain outbreaks of the plague. Sometimes 50% of a town would die all in a couple of weeks. It was really alarming. Yeah. Amish count 3. Take a shot, everyone. Take a shot. Okay, so this first letter that I'm going to read to you was written in 1464. And this is her writing to Filippo. So this is how she starts the letter. In the name of God, April 7th, 1464. You still say that you're happy that the flax you're sending Katerina shouldn't cost them anything. I wanted you to say so because it seems to me too much flax to give to Marco because he can afford to pay for it. Giving them 10 bundles at what time is a lot and enough for 2 presents. When I realized you wanted to give it to them, I left saying anything about it until I'd heard from you. And now I'll do what it is you want. In a letter to Giovanni Bonzi, you say that Sandro's boy arrived there on the 25th. May God be praised. Since then, you'll have seen whether you like the look of him, and you'll let me know how he strikes you. You've got Andrea there, and I've heard amazing things about how clever he is, particularly from Tommaso Ginore, who came to see me on Easter Day and told me all about how good he is, and about Marina and how well she looks after you. Hearing such things, I find it easy to understand why you want to put off getting married for a year and why they're so slow in finding you a wife. You behave like a man who wants to put off dying or paying his debts for as long as he can. At the moment, you've only got one woman in the house and you're well looked after. But when you get married, there'll be lots of them and you'll wonder how you'll get on. So it seems to me you're wise to take your time, as you must make up your mind eventually. I talked to Tommaso about several things I've had on my mind, but I don't know what will come of it. And then, unfortunately, this particular version of the letters, they redact out paragraphs that I think are actually very interesting. For instance, the plague has broken out again, but none of those cases have actually struck close to home. And then she mentions glasses, actually. She says, Filippo should have 134 florins from Niccolo and the spectacles for his friends. So here's documentation of purchasing spectacles for reading. Now, in this era, spectacles would have been for up-close reading. They were for far-sighted people, not for nearsighted people. So if you were nearsighted, it's not until the second half of the 15th century that they developed glasses, spectacles, for nearsighted people. Okay, her letter continues. Giovanni Tornabuoni has returned, but I haven't heard anything about Lorenzo's daughter, Marietta Strozzi. He's very fat, and like you, he's nearly 40. I don't believe Giovanni would do it, and even if he'd wanted to, her mother isn't in favor of it, unless she's changed her mind, of course. You'll have heard about the galley, which was lost off the coast of Flanders. Not much is known, but many people and goods were lost. May God have mercy on them. At first, I thought about Lorenzo when I heard he was going by sea, and I'll still be very afraid when I know he's going or returning by ship. May the angel Raphael go with him. Let me know if he's back or when you expect him. Written by your Alessandra Strozzi in Florence. P.S. Do please look after Francesco. Even if he doesn't have as much ability as Andrea, you should be patient and teach him, because he has the right ideas, and this should become clear to you. Right. So you can tell that it seems when she writes her letters, she's responding to letters that she's received. So each paragraph, generally responds to something else. And she also has no problem expressing her opinion. And she's also passive aggressive sometimes. So her son is nearly 40. And he refuses to get married. And she is so frustrated by this that she's gotten passive aggressive about it. She says here about his not wanting to get married. Hearing such things, I find it easy to understand why you want to put off getting married for another year and why they're so slow in finding you a wife, right? You behave like a man who wants to put off dying or paying his debts for as long as he can, right? So she's phrased it, she realizes that he views marriage as a very unenjoyable prospect. and and she's so frustrated with him delaying it that she compares him to this fat 40-year-old man. And she basically, in a later letter, she says to him, if every man were as reluctant to get married as you are, the world would be devoid of people. So she's starting to lose patience with him. It's one thing for a man to not be married by 30. It's another thing entirely for him not to be married by 40. Okay, questions or comments? Yeah. Let me see. That really shows how women held more influence than we thought, how she mentioned her mother isn't for the marriage. Yeah, so here's the thing about women in Florence. Technically, right, they don't have many rights. They don't have much legal status on their own. But as a widow, they get a lot of legal status and they get a lot of more rights because then they are suddenly representing the family. And women will always find a way to have to participate in the power structures, right? If a man wants a harmonious home, even in medieval Florence, he knows that he's going to have to compromise with his wife, and then he's going to have to respect her opinion. So yeah, letters like this absolutely show just how much more enfranchised women were in practice, even if not in legally speaking. Drink blocked another one. Oh my goodness. Yeah, her letters being read on live stream in Korea is wild. It's a little meta. I totally agree with that. And yet I think she might appreciate that her letters were being read to an international audience in a distant land. Right? So the thing about Alessandra's letters is that she writes them herself. They're written in her hand. And this shows that she was literate and she was scriviate. She could write on her own. Now, her hand is apparently not the elegant humanist hand that is taught in formal education in 15th century Florence, but it is very neat and it's very legible. And so it's very clear that not only did she write letters, even though she says frequently, I do so dislike writing letters, which is a very interesting thing to say while she's writing a letter. She also kept the books. So the account books for this family, she kept them herself. They're in her handwriting, which I also found to be very interesting. I just found that out recently. Yeah. Yeah, Ryan does good work on blocking the people. So letters like this show how much more influence women had in the family because, here we have that thing. Giovanni Tornabuoni is returned, but I haven't heard anything about Lorenzo's daughter. He's very fat. Like you, he's nearly 40. I don't believe that Giovanni's going to consent to the marriage. And even if he'd wanted to, her mother isn't in favor of it. So the potential bride's mother isn't in favor of it. Therefore, it's unlikely to happen. There's an interesting glimpse, though, into the fears of the era and the realities of travel and commerce in this era. So it's a reference to this ship that sank. Alessandra says, you'll have heard about the galley which was lost off the coast of Flanders. Not much has been revealed, not much is known, but many people and goods were lost. May God have mercy on them. So Florence makes a lot of its money on banking, but there's a lot of merchants. In fact, her sons go and get into the wool business and become very successful at it. So commerce in the Middle Ages absolutely relies heavily on ship travel and cargo transport by ship. And so a ship going down is, yes, it's a sad loss of life, but it's a massive loss of financial resources for whomever had their business basically being shipped on that vessel. But there was actually, and you could take out insurance policies against this in Florence. I know people think that insurance is a modern thing. It is not. You could actually take out insurance policies in Florence against a wide array of happenstances, including you could take out an insurance policy on your daughter when she married, so that if she died before childbirth, if she died in childbed, you would actually get money for her. You would get some of her dowry back, basically. It's different time, but insurance, nothing new. Nothing new at all. Where am I? I am currently in Korea. We are at the Daegu Arboretum. This is an absolutely gorgeous place. I'll just show you one more time. Yeah, we're here in the traditional Korean garden of the Daegu Arboretum. In Korea, yes. South Korea, no. I would not be live streaming from North Korea for many reasons. And as an American, I would probably not get to leave North Korea alive either. Yep. Yeah. Let me see. Did people of this rank pay and maintain their own mail carriers, like a family FedEx? So they didn't maintain their own mail carriers, but they paid couriers. So there were professional couriers, people you could pay to literally take messages and mail for you. So it wasn't so much that you necessarily, families of their rank had their own private. Did they have their own permanent private couriers? I haven't seen that, not in her household accounts anyway. But there are entries in the expense accounts paying various people to carry things like letters and to deliver goods and send presents and whatnot. But it doesn't seem like it was any kind of really well organized private system, at least not in Florence. Yep. Oh, Leah Kim, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. Let me see. Why am I in historical reels? No idea. Neuropathical? No idea. But here you have landed. Right. Was there ever not enough water to drink on the ship? I mean, only. That would only, so in the Mediterranean, no. Ships generally, followed the coastline and they stopped frequently and resupplied. If your ship gets blown off course or if you end up in the doldrums, then you might eventually run out of water if it doesn't rain. But mostly at this era, we're not talking about ships crossing vast open oceans. They stuck close to the shore generally, and they followed the trade winds. So that prevented them from getting stuck in something like a doldrum. So not that often. They went out well supplied. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Bonzuno. Appreciate that. I think that's Bongzuno. Sorry, I had to get closer to read the tiny Hangul. Bongzuno, that's very sweet of you. Appreciate that. Yeah. So you just scroll back. Okay, fantastic. Am I a Puritan? Oh, that's a new one. No. How can you tell I'm not a Puritan? 1, you can see hair. 2, big, huge, low neckline. 3, bright colors. 4, this is a 15th century ensemble which predates the Puritans by over 100 years. So, no. I guess we'll have to add Puritan to the drinking game. Okay. So, the other interesting thing is the discussion about sending flax, which is at the beginning of the letter. She says, "You say still that you're happy that the flax you're sending Katerina shouldn't cost them anything." So Katerina is one of his sisters, one of her daughters, right? And it's very interesting. I wanted to say so, but it seems to me too much flax to give Marco because he can afford to pay for it. This is Marco Parenti. Caterina is her daughter, and she marries into the Parenti clan. And Marco Parenti is wealthy. Absolutely. But basically, her brother wants to give her this flax as a gift. But Alessandra is saying, no, Marco is rich. You shouldn't be giving him anything. He should pay for it. Giving them 10 bundles at one time is a lot and enough for 2 presents. Right. And then she says passive aggressively, when I realized you wanted to give it to them, I didn't say anything about it until I'd heard from you. And now I'll do what you want. It's so passive aggressive. You can hear the sighs and see the eye rolls in the letter. But it's interesting to see this sense of frugality that she has, even though she comes from a very upper class family in Florence. She's part of the mercantile patricianate of Florence. And she's basically saying, you know what, we shouldn't be giving him anything because he's rich, he can afford to pay for it. So much for the, no generosity of gift giving. If he doesn't need the charity, we shouldn't give it to him. Yeah. Definitely not a Calvinist. Calvinist. Was fishing on the ship common while traveling? I actually can't tell you that. I haven't read anything about, I haven't read very much about what medieval life aboard a ship was. What I do understand, though, as I said, is that they generally stuck really close to the coast and they resupplied frequently. So their main goal was to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, and fishing would have required slowing down. And those ships are not designed for fishing, right? These are, caravels and galleys and whatnot. They're not designed to be fishing ships. So I really, really doubt it. That probably only would have happened if they got stuck in a doldrum somewhere and they were basically, stuck dead in the water, and then they might have to fish for their lives. But no, these ships aren't designed for that. Fishing boats are completely different vessel, completely much smaller, different situation. Yeah, I do. I agree. Jose, I agree. I wish we could go back to letter writing. It is a lost art and it should be brought back. Jerry Treat, welcome to my medieval story time. Thank you for joining us today. You're what I see BBC videos about. Okay, interesting. Am I in Hawaii? No, I am not in Hawaii. I am in Daegu, South Korea. I'm actually in the Daegu Arboretum. This beautiful, beautiful garden here. Yep. So yeah, welcome to Daegu, South Korea. Okay, so that was letter number 1 that I wanted to read to you. So let me give you a little bit of background about this next letter. Hold on a minute. Where did that letter go? Oh, darn it. Okay. Well, the next letter that I had, apparently the page marker went away. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So Alessandra has 8 children. 3 of them and her husband die in a plague outbreak in the 1430s, like 1434-ish, maybe. I think, is that right? Yeah, 1434-ish, I think. Akwe, hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Adding Korea to the bucket list. I thought you're in Switzerland. Yeah, a lot of people think that. I'm not. Why are we in Korea? My husband is retired from the U.S. Army, and we were stationed here a whole bunch. Over the last 12 years, we probably spent 9 of them here. We are currently here as long-term tourists, but we're hoping to live here again on a more permanent basis. So we're working the permanent employment angle from that. So we're in that weird in-between place between casual tourist and permanent resident. Oh yeah, Korea's great. There's so many things to love. Yeah, definitely beats living in the US, but there are so many things to love. Yep. Okay, so Alessandra Strozzi. So we are reading, first off, welcome to Medieval Storytime. For those joining, I am reading letters that were written by a woman who lived in 15th century Florence, Alessandra Strozzi, née Matinghi. And she marries Matteo Strozzi in the 1420s. They have 8 children. They get exiled to Pesaro because the Strozzi fall on the wrong side of a power struggle with the Medici. And then plague kills her husband and 3 of her children, leaving her as head of the family, basically, and to raise everyone, educate everyone, and keep the family business going, which she does successfully and adroitly, I might add. She apparently dies at about the age of 65, which is a decent age. It's not old, not even by medieval standards, but it's a respectable age, especially for a woman who had 8 children. She didn't die in childbirth, so wow. Big accomplishment there. So one of her daughters is named Alessandra, which is like a nickname from Alessandra, so basically named after her. And she ends up marrying a man named Giovanni di Donato Bonzi. And as we will see, they end up having some issues. So I thought I would read a letter that actually takes place right after that wedding. And it also takes place during this letter was actually written during the Lenten period, and we just finished Easter, the Lent and Easter season. So I thought it would be interesting to read this letter from that era. Right. So as she says, the format is I will read the entire letter. Then we will go back through bit by bit, and I will take questions, and I will explain bits and give you some added information. So that is the format. Okay, so here we go. The last letter I wrote to you was on the 11th of December. I haven't written to you since then because I've had a stomach complaint and haven't been able to bend over to write. I've been taking medicine for a month and I'm a lot better. If it weren't for Lent, I think I'd be completely cured. Easter will come, God willing, and I'll get better. Now, you've heard from Antonio Strozzi how last month we married Alessandra to Giovanni di Donato Bonzi, who is a respectable, well-behaved young man and quite acceptable. He has so many good qualities, I'm sure she'll be as well-placed in marriage as I was. Judging by what I've heard about him and what I saw last summer, which I spent in Riccardo Mancinghi's country house, I'm very pleased with him. Although there are 7 brothers in his family, he lives by himself, separate from the rest. He's in Rome at present on business, or rather about a company he had with Castellano di Castel Sant'Agnolo, who has died. He won't be here until the 8th of May. Alessandra has a dowry of 1,000 florins made up of cash and trousseau. I know Antonio has told you all about this. Favilla brought me the wicker cart, and inside were 36 pounds of flax and a sack of 51 pounds of almonds, 24 pounds of capers, 3 jars of sweetmeats, all of it good and fine. They came at the right time since I've been sick, and I congratulate you on that. I sent Caterina her share of the almonds and capers and a similar amount to Antonio Strozzi. I couldn't do less. The almonds have been very dear because there hasn't been any harvested here this year. On the same subject, you sent 110 pounds of flax to Marco. The flax again, to Marco. Favilla told me he'd arranged with you that altogether the cartage would be 14 lire, and you'd given him a ducat and a half, which, according to him, was worth 6 lire and 18 soldi. So he was owed 7 lire and 2 soldi. He asked me to give him 4 soldi straight away because he needed the money, and to pay the 3 lire and 2 soldi later. So I did. I've credited the 3 lire and 2 soldi, which I didn't pay, to his account. Marco gave me his share of the cartage, which was 7 lire, because so much of it was his. I've just received the 12 pairs of botargo, which are very fine. It's good of you to remember me, because these days I need your kind thoughts, but I'd like to have you near me even more. May God give us the grace of being near each other and a comfort to each other, as I wish. I'm glad Nicolo and Matteo have arrived there, because I've been so sad and worried for the last 2 months, not hearing any news of them. Bad sons, they didn't write to her while they were traveling. I kept thinking to myself that they'd had bad luck and things had turned out badly for them. I kept asking Antonio and Marco if they'd heard anything, but they kept saying no. Now, having heard they've arrived safe and well, they've told me about the accident. May God be praised for keeping them from harm. Antonio did the right thing not to tell me while I was ill. I think I would have died of grief. Embrace them for me, and most of all, Matteo. He doesn't know how to look after himself, and he must have been worn out. If you think he needs anything from here, let me know, and I'll send it. May God give him grace. Make sure he writes to me often. I have great need of him now because of the business with Alessandra, to answer letters because I can't write that much. Don't pay any attention when I don't answer all your letters, and do write me often, all the same. And now that Nicolo is back, you must keep your promise to come here, and if possible, you should come before Alessandra goes to her husband. It would be a great comfort to us to have you here. May God give you the grace to do so, if it's for the best. So far, I haven't made up my mind or even thought about Caterina. Since that little slave from Barcelona came, she's been better and behaves more peacefully. So far as Jacopo's slave is concerned, I'm thinking of keeping her until Alessandra goes to her husband, and then she can leave. I'll keep you informed about everything. Nothing more for now. Remember us to Nicolo, and do look after Matteo. May God keep you all from harm. From your Alessandra in Florence, in a hurry. So I really like this letter for multiple reasons. One, it shows that mothers have always been mothers. Her sons were gone for 2 months, and she heard nothing from them. And of course, she imagined the worst, rather than just assuming that something prevented them from writing to her. Does anyone else's mother act that way? Anyone? Mine certainly does. But on the other hand, I mean, 2 months is, they could have sent her a note. Anything, just, we're alive, more will come. Anything. 2 months seems like a long time, especially after they lived through the plague with her, right? They watched 3 of their siblings and their father die, so maybe a little more consideration would be appropriate in this case. Okay. Have I read War and Peace? Yes, I have. I have read several works by Tolstoy. Not my favorite. The Russian authors, honestly, mostly, especially the 19th century Russian authors, it's stuff to terminate one's life by. It is depressing. It's just depressing. Yep. Yep. So what are we reading? We have just finished reading, one of the second letter of the selected letters of Alessandra Strozzi. Alessandra was a widow living in Florence. She was a member of the mercantile patricianate, basically the controlling class of Florence, in the first half of the 15th century. Actually, she dies in 1475, I think. So she actually lives through most of the 15th century in Florence and is witness to a great number of events. And as such, she provides us with a valuable source of historical information that isn't subject to the usual intentional bias and propaganda of many chronicles from this era. So she also writes about day-to-day life and not just great man history. So it's a really rich window into the past. So this letter that let's now go back through the letter and we'll discuss some very interesting details of the letter that will also help you understand medieval life specifically, especially in this case, life in 15th century Florence, a little bit better. Yeah. Unknownium, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Serkan, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. Yep. Yeah. I appreciate that compliment. Thank you. Fresh new music. Okay, so everyone, this is not a religious, so it doesn't matter what my particular faith is. This is a medieval living history channel. We try to avoid modern politics and modern religion in the chat because we're trying to keep it focused on the history, right? Just keep that out there. And this is not a place to proselytize for any religious belief. Yep. Yep. Yeah, medieval. Oh, Kokusetsukuriyami. Thank you. Am I a nun? No. Wow, that's a new one. Am I a nun? That's a first one, guys. I don't know. Should we add that to the Creative Contessa drinking game?
It's already on.
It's already on? Okay. We've added. Are you a nun is now part of the drinking game. Everyone drink a shot of your beverage of choice. Okay, so for those, am I a real Contessa? It depends on what you mean by real. No, I'm not Amish either. Everyone take a shot. A couple of ways you can tell I'm not a nun or Amish or Mennonite. See all this low-cut dress, all this skin. Not a nun, not Amish, not Mennonite. Way very immodest. Purple, blue fitted garments. Not nun, not Amish, not Mennonite. Am I a real Contessa? So Contessa is a title that I actually earned in a medieval living history organization. So if by real do you mean, do I have letters patent from a king or queen? No. But honestly, all nobility is imagined anyway. No, but it's part of my medieval living history brand. So hence the Creative Contessa. Yep. And this is a 15th century ensemble. Yep. Was childbirth painful in the Middle Ages? Childbirth has always been painful. For humans. Humans have some physiological flaws when it comes to childbearing. And it comes from us transitioning from an animal that walks on all fours, a quadruped, to an animal that walks upright. And unfortunately, our bodies haven't really accommodated for that shift. And so, yeah, childbirth for humans has been painful for always, since always. Middle Ages, modern world, doesn't matter. Could they give women something for the pain? They could have given them poppy juice, but poppy juice can just put you in a coma, which they knew, because it was hard to control the strength of poppy juice in the Middle Ages, which they knew. So no, they wouldn't have given anything for pain for a woman. But what they did do differently about childbirth in the Middle Ages, and Alessandra would have benefited from this, they had birthing stools. They didn't have them on their backs. They actually sat them upright so that gravity would help with the process. So a birthing stool is like basically a chair with a lot of the seat part of the chair not there. And it actually allows gravity to help pull the baby from the body without having to push it out violently. It was a much better way of giving birth. So that's how Alessandra would have given birth. Yeah. But she wouldn't have had any sort of analgesic for the pain or anesthetic. God, no. It would have been way too risky to give her poppy juice. She just as likely could have slipped into a coma and never woken up again. In fact, there is a medical manual from I think it's an Italian medical manual from the 15th century that advises if you use poppy juice on your patient to do surgery, by the way, it actually, they did that. They used it for surgery, but they knew that it could put you in a coma from which you would not awaken. And so in this medical manual, it actually says that every hour you should smack your patient really, really hard in the face so that they don't sleep too deeply. So that was the way that they prevented patients surgical patients who were undergoing surgery from dying in a coma, basically. So no, they wouldn't have given her anything. Yep. Yeah, let me see. Didn't they believe the pain during childbirth was necessary for a woman to experience, like it was sinful to try and avoid it? I think that's a post-medieval belief, honestly. I haven't seen any writings from the Middle Ages that attest that. A lot of what we believe about the medieval world is actually a post-Reformation development and not even part of the Catholic Church. It's usually part of some Protestant church. So the moralization of poverty, not a medieval thing. That's a Protestant thing and post-Reformation. The moralization of illness as being tied to poverty is a post-medieval thing, also tied to Protestants. So yeah. Yeah, I don't, yeah. So I'm surprised I don't have my jewelry either. And that's because when we left the apartment this morning, we realized that my wallet was missing and it sort of threw us off our game. So I ended up leaving the apartment with no bling. The only bling I have on are my very, very nice replica medieval rings. Right, this is called a stirrup ring. That's a ruby. Right, and this is also a stirrup ring. It's also a stirrup ring, and that's a sapphire. That's it. That's all I've got on. But I meant to put on more. Definitely meant to put on more. But yeah, as I said, we were a little distracted. Oh, there are other people here who have their phones, so you might be hearing their noises, unfortunately. Yeah. Let me see. I would imagine poppy seed juice can also affect the baby. I'm not certain about that. Not as much crosses that barrier as we think. But I think they would have been more concerned with the slipping into a coma thing and not waking up thing. Yep. Okay. Yes, the Black Death. The Black Death happens during medieval times, but it doesn't start there. Ancient Greece, Athens, also suffered from a bubonic plague. So it just, went away and came back and went away and came back. And when it came back after a long time, then it came back hard, which was the Black Death in the 1340s to 1350s, because before that, the previous bubonic plague was the Justinianic plague, which was from the 6th century to the basically kind of ran for about 150 years. And then there was this long gap with no plague, and we lost our immunity to it. And then when it came back in the 1340s, well, that was it. Yep. Jose, thank you for joining us. He says, can I ask what continent region you're located in? Because it's completely dark in the US and you're in sunlight. Yeah. Welcome to Daegu, South Korea, everyone. I am currently in the Arboretum. Yeah, I'm currently in the Arboretum. This is the traditional Korean garden as per the sign. It's an absolutely beautiful space. I'm in this lovely pavilion. You can see the beautiful roof. Right. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. Oh, poo. Sorry, everyone. It did not like any of that just happened. Apologies. Not happy with all that motion. This, in fairness, this is a camera stand. It's not a gimbal, so it's not really designed for that. Is it true that somebody put rats in the wells and was a reason for the bubonic plague? That's an internet myth. So no, that's an internet myth. It's fleas that actually carry the bubonic plague that travel on rats, but the rats themselves don't get sick from it. No, that's a myth.
Drink butter churning.
Drink butter churning. Everyone take a shot. Someone asked if I could butter churn. Where is this place? We're in Daegu, South Korea. So yeah, we're at the Daegu Arboretum. It's a beautiful, beautiful day here. I thought you were Amish or in America. No. So I am currently dressed. I am actually dressed now like a 15th century countess cosplaying a shepherdess. Because I forgot my bling, and also I'm not wearing the proper overlayer that I really should be wearing to be out and about. So like I said, 15th century countess cosplaying a shepherdess. Are you a historian or just really smart? Depends on what you mean by historian. Do I have a PhD? No. I'd consider myself more of an independent scholar of history. I've basically been researching and reading and analyzing history for decades just on my own. I have a bachelor's degree in linguistics and translation and interpretation, which is a big part of it. And I'm actually about to enter a PhD program for fashion history, but it depends on what you mean by historian. What counts as a historian? Yeah, life is good in Asia. I love life in Asia. Okay, so let's get back to our letter, everyone. So this letter that we just read a long time ago, since you had all these great questions, the letter that we read a little while ago started with, I haven't written you since the 11th of December because I've had a stomach complaint and I haven't been able to bend over to write. So this is Alessandra Strozzi, a widow from 15th century Florence, writing to her sons. And she actually notes that her stomach, she's had some kind of digestive issues, some kind of gastrointestinal issues. And so it's actually prevented her from bending over. That's because writing desks in the Middle Ages were slopes. You would write on a slope like this. And they're actually saying she can't bend over because her stomach hurts too much. But what this also tells us, she's not using clerks. She's not using a scrivener. She's not using a scribe. She is writing this herself, right? She writes her own letters. Other people aren't writing them for her. And she also says, I've been taking medicine for a month and I'm a lot better. If it weren't for Lent, the season of Lent, I would probably be completely cured. Why? What does Lent have to do with her ailment and not getting better from it? I'll tell you why. Because in Lent, in medieval Europe, all across medieval Europe, East and Western Europe, didn't matter. You fasted during Lent. You didn't eat meat, you didn't eat animal products, no cheese, no butter. And so she's basically acknowledging that fasting has probably not helped her get better because of the kinds of things she's had to eat. Maybe she feels they've weakened her constitution, they've thrown her humors off balance. And so she thinks that if she could actually eat a proper, normal, well-rounded diet, then she would get better. So that's why she says, if it weren't for Lent, I think I'd be completely cured. Easter will come, God willing, and I'll get better. Because with the arrival of Easter, she can go back to eating a more regular diet, including a variety of meat and cheese and dairy. Right. Thank you, Tootie Titches. Appreciate that. You were wondering why it was daytime. Yeah, it's welcome to Daegu, South Korea. Yeah. Okay, so she then says, you've heard last month how we married Alessandra to Giovanni di Donato Bonzi, who is a respectable and well-behaved young man and quite acceptable. So these are all important qualities in a husband, according to Alessandra, right? He has so many good qualities. I'm sure she'll be as well placed in marriage as I was. And this is one of the few times when she refers refers to her own feelings about her marriage. And so it seems that she thought she had a good situation. She had a good arrangement. That she therefore had, this is an oblique way of saying that Matteo Strozzi was a good man, that he was well behaved, that he had many good qualities, and that she was therefore actually happy married to him, right? You have to kind of read between the lines here, but we don't often find these sorts of windows into a person's individual feelings in the Middle Ages, and certainly not a 15th century Florentine woman. So it's a very, very interesting little tidbit. You find these little treasures here in these letters, right? And then she says, judging by what I've heard about him and what I saw last summer, which I spent in Riccardo Macinghi's country house, I'm very pleased with him. Although there are 7 brothers, he lives by himself, separate from the rest, and that is a really big deal, right? She has married her daughter, Alessandra, to this man who, even though he has all these brothers, God, 7 brothers, he still lives by himself, which is great because it means that her daughter will have her own household, which Alessandra knows it's hard to be happy as a woman if you're living in another woman's household, right? If you're living in your mother-in-law's household rather than having your own. So him living separately is definitely, in her mind, a plus for her. And you know what's really interesting? This also shows us how much she cares about Alessandra, her daughter. There is this bizarre myth that medieval mothers didn't care for or love their children because of the rates of infant mortality. If anything, that made them love the children who survived even more. Right? So this shows that she cares about Alessandra's happiness. She has chosen, because remember, it's Alessandra who's doing the choosing. Her husband's dead, right? She wanted a man who would... Oh, wind. Goodness, sorry about that, everyone. The wind blew it right into my face. I'm probably gonna have a big swollen bruise on my cheek. Don't worry about it, everyone. It's fine. Oh, goodness. Okay. Brusque of wind. Okay. Question. I missed the beginning of this chat. Who are the letters addressed to? So these are Alessandra's letters to her sons. In this case, this is being written to one of her 2 sons, Filippo, well, 2 who survived. Filippo. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Steel Bro. Lovely gift. But this shows us that Alessandra Strozzi to her son, Filippo, Florentine widow, writing in 1451. This shows that she cares about Alessandra. She cares about her happiness. She cares about a good man, and not just a man who can further her family's fortunes. And this is not the first time we see that. She writes multiple times, setting her daughters, including her husband's bastard daughter, a daughter with another woman, a mistress. And Alessandra raises her like her own and sees that she is also well married despite status. Alessandra is a really good woman, and she cares about her stepdaughters. She's the opposite of the evil stepmother. But there's another interesting thing here. She actually says that she basically spent a summer observing Giovanni before she consented to the marriage, right? Judging by what I've heard about him, but also what I saw last summer when she observed him at her cousin's country house, right? So she actually took a lot of time to help, to investigate this potential marriage. Right. Then there's this mention of a dower. She says, Oh, really? Did we?
Yes, people are reporting something's wrong with the mic. Can I just check?
Okay. A minute, everyone. Sorry. Okay. Okay, let's try again. Unplugging and replugging everything. Back up a little bit to make more room here on the platform as more people want to come and share the space. Okay, how's the sound, everyone? Let me know. Okay, sounds a lot better. Something must have come unplugged. Sorry, everyone. Thank you for letting us know. Hold on. Thank you for letting us know, everyone. Appreciate that. Okay. If I were in North Korea, you would not be seeing me right now. Oh, darn it. Okay, let me see if I can find the page of that letter, 1451. 14. It is 1451. There was no one here when we set up, and I mean no one, and suddenly everyone's here. It's okay. It's fine. I love sharing spaces. Okay, so Alessandra says something interesting about Giovanni, this new husband of her daughters. Supposedly, last month we married Alessandra to Giovanni, but what does getting married mean in 15th century Florence? It doesn't mean what a lot of people think it does, right? So they didn't have church wedding ceremonies in this era. In Florence, weddings were purely a legal matter. You could sometimes have a priest come and bless it, but there was a series of agreements and signings, and it was there wasn't a big glorious romantic wedding. It was an exchange of vows. It was a signing of contracts, and the thing that made the marriage actually final was when the bride moves to the groom's house. That is what makes the thing final. And here we find out that hasn't happened yet, because she says Giovanni won't be here until the 8th of May. So he's not even there. The contract was signed. He wasn't present for the ceremony. He wasn't, and probably Alessandra may or may not have been, because it wasn't for them. This was about the families. It was a business arrangement. For all the respect and love that can absolutely develop between a couple, that's a later development. And the people actually involved in the wedding, the people getting married, often had very little to do with the wedding itself. Very different from now. Aw, Luke, you poor little small penis baby. Are you suffering from small penis syndrome? Sorry. Yeah. So then we have this interesting section about almonds. Now, you have to understand that almonds in the Middle Ages were very important because for about 130 days of the year, people could not eat dairy. They were not allowed to eat dairy. They were not allowed to eat cheese. They weren't allowed to eat milk, right? So what that meant is that they came up with substitutes. And that's because of the Lenten days, fasting days, ember days. There are a whole bunch of different days when people are basically supposed to fast. They're supposed to eat in a very modest manner. They're not supposed to indulge in excess. So what the wealthy came up with is almond milk. Almond milk is a medieval thing. They also actually developed almond cheese. They developed almond spread. They developed a wide array of dishes that use almonds and almond milk instead of meat broth, for instance. Almonds, however, were expensive, and some of you asked me about this. You've asked me, well, how much were almonds? Could everyone afford them? No, not everyone could afford them. And even Alessandra talks about them being expensive here. And I think we should all take a moment to appreciate the quantities with which Alessandra is making these purchases, because she says, Favilla brought me the wicker cart, and inside were 36 pounds of flax. Flax is what is used to make linen, which also tells us something about the home economy of Alessandra's household, that she was actually involved. She either directly or involved in or oversaw the production of linen in the household, right? That's why they're getting flax. And then she says there was also a sack of 51 pounds of almonds. 51 pounds. How many of you buy almonds in the 51 pound quantity? Starving, appreciate that. Thank you so much. How do you milk an almond? I actually have a medieval cooking show on Sundays my time, Saturdays or early Sunday your time, depending on where you are in the world, where I demonstrate how to make almond milk on a very regular basis. And I will be once again tomorrow demonstrating how to make almond milk. But basically, you soak the almonds overnight, you crush them in a mortar and pestle, and you add water to them as you crush them into a paste. And the water actually draws out the oils and the some of the key flavoring components and the fats and the proteins from the almonds. That's how you make almond milk. You can actually milk an almond. It is a thing you can do. Yeah. Why did she just roast a guy? Oh, because he was an asshole and he thought that by casting aspersions on my appearance, he could get to me. But yeah, I don't have time for those kinds of small, those poor, pathetic individuals who feel like they need to take women down a peg by attacking their appearance. You can't hurt me, guys. Sorry. But you can make the live chat unpleasant for other people, and I won't have that. Yeah. You look like a vegetarian. I am not. I love meat. Pork belly is proof that God loves us. Anyway, 51 pounds of almonds. So almonds were a very big part of the cuisine of the upper levels of society. People on the lower end of the socioeconomic strata couldn't afford almonds. They were expensive. And she even mentions here that they're expensive. She says, almonds have been very dear, very expensive, because there hasn't been any harvested here this year, which means there's something happening to the almond trees in her local area, and they've had to bring them in from somewhere else. So yeah, all of those who've watched my medieval cooking shows and asked me about, well, weren't almonds expensive? Yes, they were. Almond milk was not a milk substitute for the lower classes. It was only a milk substitute for the upper classes. Yep. So, a moment to look at the South Korea is entirely unexpected. Oh, it's another person who suffers from small penis syndrome. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Right, so I sent Katerina her share of the almonds and the capers and a similar amount to Antonio Strozzi. On the same subject, you sent 110 pounds of flax to Marco. She's still on him about sending flax to Marco. Favila told me he'd arranged with you that altogether the cartage would be 14 lire, and you'd given him a ducat and a half. Okay, so she then goes on. Alessandra spends the next paragraph basically talking money with her son and making it clear to him that she is keeping very close accounts of the book. Roger, appreciate that. Thank you so much. And what are my thoughts on the drama with? I'm sorry, I have no idea. Yeah, Roger, I honestly, I don't have any thoughts on that because I don't even know what that is, but I suspect I know, but I have no thoughts on it. Anyway, back to the cartage. Cartage, people wonder how were things paid. One of you asked earlier actually about couriers and the postal system and how things were sent. Well, they literally, people, if your name was Carter, if your name is Carter, are there any Carters out there? If your name is Carter, it is likely that in some point in the pre-industrial revolution world, you actually, your ancestors were professional carters. That means you drove carts and you delivered things from point A to point B professionally. You owned a cart, you owned horses, you owned oxen, and you would actually deliver things. It's like a pre-delivery, a pre-FedEx system. And so we actually have her talking about, Favila told me he'd arranged with you that altogether the cartage would cost 15 lira. And then she says, she talks about, Marco gave me his share of the cartage, which was 7 lira, because so much of it was his. So yes, they've all basically gone in together on this delivery. And she's actually pointing out that, well, more of the cart was filled with his things than with my things, so he's going to pay the more of it, right? So there's this, even in the 15th century, there's this idea of we're going to split the bill. Yeah. Yeah. Carlos, my ancestors made cars. What's my cooking show is called Medieval Cooking Party. Yep. It's basically Medieval Cooking Party. I misunderstood a simple sentence. She didn't understand why she took that negatively. My sub is unacquired now. Okay. I'm sorry if I misunderstood something. Yeah, so this is technically medieval. It's 15th century. And actually, this is 15th century French, Flemish, or English. So, yeah. What did I take negatively? Handsome, what did I take negatively? Oh, okay. Yeah. Welcome, Joanna. Thank you for joining us from Greece. Really interested in the background. That looks like an antique wagon. This is not an antique wagon. This is a pavilion, actually. This is a pavilion in a garden. This is the Arboretum in Daegu, South Korea. So this is a historical reconstruction of a historical Korean garden of the kinds that would have been in places like palaces, basically. Yep. So, yep, not a cart. What is my take on the Inquisition? My take on the Inquisition is that people misunderstand it hideously. The Inquisition was not responsible for millions of deaths. It just wasn't. The Inquisition didn't execute anyone, actually. The civilian authorities executed people, not the Inquisition. The Inquisition, its whole job, it was also not a single organization. It was very local. And so they didn't burn millions of people at the stake. The Inquisition was more interested in recuperating people, getting them to repent and bringing them back into the fold so they could be part of the community. So that's my take on the Inquisition in a nutshell. Right. I'm not certain I would say the Inquisition was a force for good, but it wasn't a force for evil either. Am I a lecturer or a teacher or what? No, I didn't. No. To Danix, I wasn't responding to your comment about South Korea. I didn't take it negatively at all. I thought it was a positive thing. I'm sorry for that miscommunication. I was responding to someone else. If there was anything negative, I was responding to someone else. To Danix, I really wasn't taking your comment negatively at all. Not in the least. I promise. I apologize profusely. That was not my intention. I remember it, which is why I was confused when you said I took your comment negatively, because I definitely did not. Sorry, I was responding to someone else. I think it's a comment that we hid that you didn't get to see because we hid it that quickly. Yep, sorry about that. Not you. Oh, are you Amish? Everyone drink? I'm not gilding the lily, Cotroneo. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of misinformation and exaggeration about the Inquisition. So, yeah, there weren't millions of people. Millions of people were not burnt at the stake on the orders of the Inquisition or on the orders of anyone. Those numbers are massively exaggerated. Yep. I didn't say the Inquisition was a force for good, but it's probably one of the most misunderstood organizations in the Middle Ages. Yeah, I'm not pro-Inquisition. Yeah. Okay, so everyone, there is an Inquisition, and the Inquisition was very local, and the Spanish Inquisition is its own, the Inquisition wasn't just the Spanish Inquisition. There was an Inquisition. There was an Inquisition everywhere in Europe, right? And the Spanish Inquisition is also massively exaggerated and blown out of proportion. It just is. They tortured people to death in the name of God. There's a lot of Protestant propaganda about the Spanish Inquisition that has misinformed people's understanding of it. During the Reformation in the 16th century, most of what people know, in quotes, about the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition especially, is Protestant anti-Catholic propaganda. So, yeah. Anyway, I know the Edict of the Alhambra was garbage, so I definitely don't don't agree with that. Yeah. I think the Reyes Católicos did some of the greatest damage to Spain that anyone could do by literally evicting their educated and their savvy business people. But anyway. Sophocles, I didn't say that either. But have you actually done primary source research into the Inquisition? Have you actually read documents from the era? Have you actually looked at primary sources? from the 15th and the 16th century, specifically the 15th century. The second someone says the Spanish Inquisition, it tells me they don't necessarily understand actually about the Inquisition, because the Spanish Inquisition was only in Spain. And Spain wasn't even Spain until the end of the 15th century. So yeah, most of the Middle Ages, Spain was not Spain. Spain was a bunch of different kingdoms. And the earlier you go back in the Middle Ages, the less of Spain was Christian. In terms of the ruling hierarchy. So, yeah. And I was there, I built a time machine and saw it firsthand. Cool, 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 cool. Okay, back to Alessandra's letters. Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing about history. History is not set in stone, everyone. There is no single chronicle. There is no single document that starts at the beginning of human civilization and documents objectively everything that has happened. That's not how history is. History is recorded in a variety of sources and documents. It's recorded through archaeology. It's recorded in some cases through climatology. There are many different ways that we can learn about our history, many different sciences through which we can learn about our history. And we are constantly discovering new sources of information. We're uncovering new archaeology. We're discovering new primary sources. We're discovering new sources of letters, new chronicles, new archives of information that may have been in a private library for 500 years. And that changes our understanding of the past. But that also means that to a certain degree, history can be subjective. You can know that a battle happened in 1436, but the why, the things that led to that battle, the causes of that battle, can be open to a subjective interpretation. But also we can find new information that completely changes our understanding of that battle, for instance. So we should never get too mired down in thinking that we know what we know what we know. What we know is what we currently know, but next week we may know more or we may know differently. So, yeah. Yeah. Oh, history is constantly being, history is not being perverted by modern scholars, because history has been perverted all throughout history by chroniclers writing chronicles that are filled with lies and exaggeration and propaganda. It has been perverted by humans just being human. The Victorians hideously misinterpreted medieval history to their own advantage because they wanted to feel better about their own crappy society, right? So if you read what the Victorians wrote about the Middle Ages, they lied. They outright lied. They outright cherry-picked information. They outright made assumptions that weren't based on actual information. And most people's understanding of the Middle Ages is predicated on crappy Victorian historians who perverted history. So modern scholars are now doing, for the most part, doing the service of actually examining primary sources and trying to get to the bottom of what things actually were like, how things actually went, what actually caused things. Good scholars are. There are also crappy scholars. There are ones who purposefully misrepresent and overinterpret the sources. So humans will human. But to say that modern scholars are perverting things, but somehow scholars in the past were all perfect and pure and better, nah, sorry, bullshit. I call bullshit. I call malodorous bovine fecal matter. Yeah, I mean, and yes, winners and losers, right? The winners will write the history and they will pervert the history. Absolutely, 100%. They'll frame it to put themselves in the best possible light, which is why we have to consider multiple sources. It's best if any given event in history is viewed from multiple angles. And also if we don't just have written sources, if we have archaeology that can back it up, if we have climatology that can back it up, if there is, some other form of evidence that can help open or create a clearer picture of the history. Yep. Where did I get the hat? I made it. I actually teach workshops on how to make this. It's called a kerchief, right? Yep. Where are you? It's light outside. I am in Daegu, South Korea. Yep, this is South Korea. This is not We're in a beautiful traditional Korean garden. Yep. Beautiful place. Oh, aho kotroneo. Well, you're cosplaying a historian, so, and a scholar. So good night. Sleep well. You're clearly and don't actually understand how history works. Cool. Goodbye. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. Yeah. How much linguistic barriers prevent? How much do linguistic barriers prevent documented history? I mean, that's an interesting question. How much do linguistic barriers prevent documented history? Do they, you mean people, maybe you mean whether people can write? That can be a problem, especially if a culture doesn't have a written language. And especially if a culture only has an oral history, and then if everyone from that culture dies before they can transmit it onward, that can be majorly problematic. Another big problem with history is if all the documents get destroyed, which happened during the conquest of the Americas by the Portuguese and the Spanish. They destroyed almost all the documents that the Mesoamericans had written about themselves. So yeah, that can happen, and that is a problem. And in fact, some people have hypothesized that future scholars are going to think we were an illiterate and an inscriviate society because we're now so heavily reliant on digital media that we're moving further and away from printed media, and that eventually there won't be anything but electronic media left, and future civilizations might not actually have the technology to be able to read our digital media, or the digital media won't survive. And so they'll just think that we couldn't write because there are no more books. I've actually read a couple of interesting essays postulating that. Let me see. I mean, but then there's also language, right? So language, language itself, language is sometimes I'm a linguist. Like I'm a professional translator before AI ate all of my work, basically ate my profession, and the machines too. Language is sometimes an insufficient tool to actually fully express ideas. And it's an insufficient tool to describe visual medium, for instance. So sometimes, and also just the perspective of the writer, what matters to the person writing, chronicling the events, that's going to distort what actually gets noted down. If the person chronicling the events cares about what people were wearing but doesn't care about what people were doing, then you're going to get a lot of detail about clothing, but you're not going to get a lot of detail about the way they were fighting or the way they were dancing, right? So, there's a lot of issues recorded because it's very rare that everything gets recorded. Every little detail. It's going to be specific aspects, and that's also limiting. Yep. Yep. Okay, let me see. Where did we leave off on our letter? So, welcome to Medieval Storytime, everyone. We were reading the selected letters of Alessandra Strozzi, right? And we were just talking and cards. And we were also talking about weddings and marriage in 15th century Florence, and how for a woman, for a marriage, for a wedding, the final step in the wedding was actually for the woman to go and live with the husband, right? Finally, to go into his house. And so finally, at the end of this letter, we actually have a reference to that. And it's in the final paragraph where we also talk about slavery, right? But before that, Alessandra is writing to her son Filippo, and she has sent her youngest son Matteo to him, and that's really sad, and that's really hard for her because now she has no more sons with her. She has only daughters, right? And Italian mamas, right? They love their sons. So she has sent Mateo to go be with his brothers because he's reached the age of 18, and so he's actually officially now covered by the exile ban, the ban of exile. And she actually says, now that Nicolo is back, you must keep your promise to come here. And if possible, you should come before Alessandra goes to her husband. Right? So this tells us that Alessandra is still living with Alessandra, her mother, and that the wedding is not, the marriage is not actually finally sealed yet because that final stage has not yet happened. Right? But then we have this very interesting closing paragraph. Probably going to set the live chat on fire. But here it is. We have mention of slavery. So this is not the Atlantic slave trade. There have been slaves in the Mediterranean basically all along, from Rome going forward. And Alessandra actually has some slaves in her household. She says, so far, I haven't made up my mind or even thought about Caterruccia. Caterruccia is a slave in her household. Since that little slave from Barcelona came, meaning she's actually in court, she actually purchased a slave from Barcelona, from Spain, Caterruccia has been better and behaves more peacefully. So far as Jacopo's slave is concerned, I'm thinking of keeping her until Alessandra goes to her husband and then she can leave. Right? So she actually just these women who are slaves in her household, and that she actually mentions that one of them has actually been behaving bad, but that the presence of this other slave in the household has actually kind of calmed her down. And that gives us a different idea about the role of slavery and slaves in Florentine society. It's not the same as it is later on in the United States when we have, the Atlantic slave trade and chattel slavery. It's a different kind of arrangement, right? You would expect that she wouldn't have an issue with getting a slave to behave because a slave should be in constant, fear for bodily harm. But it seems that wasn't the way slaves were treated in 15th century Florence. But it's interesting that she just mentions them here at the end, and that she's considering, she has these 3 slaves apparently, and that she's going to keep all of them in the household until Alessandra goes to live with her husband, and then she doesn't think she'll need quite so many. Yep. Okay, everyone. So that brings us to the end of our 2 selected letters of Alessandra Strozzi that I was going to share with you today. Are there any final questions? Life in 15th century Florence, or daily life in the Middle Ages? If I can make biscuits, of course I can make biscuits. What kind of person can't make biscuits? You can't. Okay, everyone. If you've enjoyed today's live stream, don't forget to double that screen to like and consider subscribing. I would like to thank my super chatters and those of you who gave me little gifts today. I would also like to thank my channel members for supporting my work, and my patrons on Patreon, and my Facebook subscribers. My patrons on Patreon, my channel members, and my Facebook subscribers all get access to a wide array of excess resources, to my Creative Contessa private Discord server, where I share a lot of extra resources and sources as I encounter in my own research, where we discuss things, where we share projects and I answer questions about projects. And of course, there's access to a whole host of extra videos, full tutorials, all sorts of extra content and perks for being a supporter of my medieval living history work and my attempt to cast a light onto daily life in the Middle Ages. Oh, that's new. Am I a wizard? Normally they ask if I'm a witch. I guess we have to ask wizard. Maybe that falls under the witch category, wizards and witches. Am I a time travel? You sound American, but it's nighttime in America. I'm a traveler. We're currently in, so that's why it's nighttime. I am American though. Yeah, so let me show you where we're at. Did we just have a camera bomber? We're in Korea, as you can see. Okay, everyone. Well, I will be doing a medieval cooking party tomorrow. We're going to be making a 15th century Neapolitan dish, lemon chicken, and I will be demonstrating how to make almond milk if you're interested. We actually finally purchased that giant pestle that I've been talking about. We finally got one. And so you're going to get to see me break in, if we get it cleaned up in time, hopefully. You might get to see me break in the giant rowboat oar size pestle for tomorrow. So we'll be making lemon chicken from an original 15th century Neapolitan recipe. So you'll get to see just how different Italian cuisine was before the Columbian exchange. Because before Columbus, you know, sailed across the ocean and accidentally ran into the Americas. And before all of those Europeans started bringing back tomatoes, potatoes, corn, green beans, vanilla, tobacco, chili peppers, everything, food in Europe, Asia, and Africa was massively different than it is now. So if you want to see what Italian cuisine was like before that, join us tomorrow. I'm very excited by this dish. It sounds absolutely delicious. I've never made it before. So we will be working through the original recipe together, looking at the original language, considering all the steps that are not clearly described in the recipe. Basically, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, but for medieval cookery. So if that interests you, then I hope to see you tomorrow. Okay, everyone, until next time, may your explorations in history be creative. Until then, everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good night.